Australians are concerned about nuclear weapons being in the wrong hands, in the hands of a regime like North Korea, in the hands of a regime like Iran. These issues concern us as they concern the peoples of the world, and they are dealt with at the Security Council. Australians are big-hearted people. We care about humanitarian disasters. We care about the fight against global poverty. This is the work of the UN. And Australians, I think too, understand that in an increasingly interconnected planet, the way in which we can make our way in the world is increasingly defined by the circumstances of the world generally. It's never been true that you can be just, your own island and a fortress. We've always had to engage with the world, but that is more true today than it has ever been in the history of the planet on which we live, and that's why the Security Council is important.
It's often said that at some point Australia will have to choose between America and China. Is it likely that on the Security Council that choice will actually be crystallised, and are we ready to make that decision?
I think that analysis is infantile. I know that it's pursued in the media from time to time, but I think it's infantile and in the face of the facts. Here we stand today with a strong defence alliance with the United States of America, which is understood and known in our region. We didn't sneak up on anybody with this defence alliance. It's been there for decades and decades and decades, and known in the region for decades and decades and decades. So we have a strong defence alliance with the US, and we have a robust relationship with China. And I know that it's fashionable in some parts of the media to talk this relationship down. That analysis is infantile. We are engaged with China deeply at every level, strongly economically, government-to-government links, people-to-people links, military-to-military links, academic-to-academic links, and the list goes on. So let's not create a world of silly analysis and false choices. That's not the world we live in. Yes, Mark.
State visit to India, and you've now had this diplomatic triumph. Do you regret, or have you moved on from your early statement that you did not have a passion for foreign affairs?
Look, what I said then I absolutely stand by, because I was describing the things that motivated me to get into politics and what's truly closest to my heart. And yes, what got me into politics and truly closest to my heart is creating opportunity and making sure that we give every child in every school a great education. That was true when I was 20 at Adelaide University. It's true as a 51-year-old Prime Minister, and if I get the opportunity to live to 80 or 90, it will be true then. That shouldn't be interpreted to say that I don't have an enthusiasm for working in other areas. For example, as a Minister of Workplace Relations, where I think the men and women of the press gallery would be able to say I showed a great deal of enthusiasm, and as Prime Minister on Australia's reputation in the world. I'm a fiercely proud Australian, and I'm proud of Australia today. This is good for us, and we should be proud of it.
Attitude towards the opposition's, I guess, statements about the bid, particularly given there's an election next year, and it's possible that there could be a coalition government during our position on the Security Council.
Well, I mean, we're elected to the Security Council now for 2 years, so sort of full stop on that sentence. I think it is disappointing that the opposition today hasn't had the generosity of spirit to say that this is a great day for Australia. It is.
In relation to the Middle East, there was some discussion about how we would vote in relation to Israel and Palestine during the year. Will Australia be taking into the Security Council its traditional position on Israel? And secondly, just on a personnel matter, would Mr Quinlan be expected to continue through the full appointment to our Security Council?
Well, if I can take them in the reverse order, I think provided he is continued, he is willing to continue to serve, this is a big and stressful job, but provided he is willing to continue to serve, I think Gary Quinlan is the right person to continue to represent our nation in New York. and having done so much to ensure that this campaign was successful, I think it's well and truly fitting and appropriate that Mr Quinlan gets to represent our nation on the Security Council. So that's the answer to your second question. On your first question, we are long historic friends of Israel, and we will continue to be friends of Israel. We are not friends who never criticise. We obviously talk to Israel as we talk to the Palestinian authorities about the pathway to peace. We would all want to see a durable peace in the Middle East, but we will take with us into the Security Council everything that has always been known about the position of Labor and the government on Israel. I'll go here and then come back. Yep, Kieran.
Further to Joe's question on the opposition, they've had a gripe about the costs. What do you say to people who say it's just too expensive, the whole thing?
There have been around $25 million devoted to this campaign. Of course, the work of DFAT has had to be geared towards the campaign as well, but $25 million spent on the campaign to hold Australia's reputation up high and to have us on a body of such important... do want to see Australia having its own voice, an Australian voice, in the main decision-making bodies of the world, and that is what we've secured.
A number of foreign aid commitments have been made in the years leading up to this bid. Are they all going to be honoured, and is there going to be any change to the foreign aid budget when you do the mid-year budget?
Well, we've shown a strong commitment on foreign aid, and you should expect us to continue to show that strong commitment. And we work around the world with a focus on poverty alleviation, on gender equality, because gender equality matters so much to development. We obviously work on education around the world. We are very focused on the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals in nations that are struggling to achieve those goals about maternal mortality, kids in school, lifting people out of absolute poverty. And we've got a lot of work to continue to do in our region and around the world to achieve those goals. Well, for all the obvious reasons, I don't get into what is a slippery slope here where you put one part of the budget to me and then 50 questions later you've gone through every other line item in the budget. So I would direct you to the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook when it's delivered.
Do you believe that the position on the Security Council will open doors in terms of bilateral talks with more countries? People will come knocking on Australia's door for not only talking to us about Security Council issues but also trade issues and so on? Would that be a spin-off?
Well, I think the fact we have succeeded shows that our bilateral relationships are in good repair, that Australia around the world is valued as an international player. So I think it shows our bilateral relationships are in good repair. Being on the Security Council is not a piece on the economic table as we go around trade discussions. It doesn't play that role, and we wouldn't seek to have it play that role. But clearly, nations will be wanting to talk to us about matters that are on the agenda at the Security Council, and that's a good thing.
The coalition has suggested that asylum seekers could stay on Nauru or Manus Island for 5 years. Is that an acceptable period of time, and how does that compare to Labor's no advantage policy?
Well, we are implementing the recommendations of the Houston Review. I would remind that that review was delivered by Angus Houston, a former chief of our Defence Force, by Paris Aristotle, a well-known refugee advocate, and by Michael Lestrange, an expert in foreign policy. They are the authors of the no advantage test, and we have adopted it as government policy. So we will continue to do what we've promised, which is implement the recommendation of the Houston Review, or the recommendations, I should say, implement the recommendations of the Houston Review. The Houston Review doesn't invite people to make stuff up as they go along. It invites people to deliver an integrated set of policy measures that will deal with the question of people smuggling and asylum seekers. So we're not making stuff up as we go along the way the opposition is. We are determined to implement the full recommendations of the Houston Review. Well, the Houston Euston Review gave guidance on how to determine this question, and it said it should be done in discussions with UNHCR. The aim here is to define what is the period of time. Some